りおしまい。
Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. In this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball as usual, particularly episode 97, which is Goku versus Tien, or the final match, Goku versus Tien, or, oh no, the final match, who will be the strongest warrior? Something like that.
Something like that.
It was too long to put. Anyways, point is, Goku versus Tien, episode 97. But before we get started, if you like what you hear, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes on YouTube Mondays and Thursdays, Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays. Please give us a subscribe over there. If you disagree or if you agree, we'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. We appreciate any engagement that comes our way. Anything else before we start, Brock?
No, let's get into it.
All right. So, without further ado, episode 97, Goku versus Tien. So, the first thing we see is the crowd prepares for the final match. We actually see a Cyclops mention that Tien has to win. After all, he has 3 eyes.
2 more than him.
Yeah. So, triple his eyes. It's like 3 of him. As Roshi watches some women exercise on his tapes, we can see that Roshi has kind of resumed his position after he's put away his Jackie Chun persona. Despite Turtle's criticism, Goku compliments Roshi, saying that he's great, old timer, before receiving his newly cleaned gi from the girls. Bulma is actually modest about her work cleaning Goku's clothes, which just blows my mind, but we'll get into that in a second. And speaking of, launch is blue launch now, and I don't think we see her change, do we? Back to blue launch.
At some point, I don't remember when it was,
And
but
so
there's a continuity of it. I'm pretty
yeah,
sure.
she's with Bulma at this point. Meanwhile, Oolong has secured a spot for all of them to watch the fight by using his powers of transformation. So let's start there at the beginning. First thing I want to talk about with this episode is Roshi's not backslide, but Roshi's assumption again of the role and the, let's say, blindness that he exhibits in the role of spiritual father.
Yeah, he resumes taking on this position of the blind father, which makes sense because this final match is above him. So he doesn't really need to be vigilant anymore. He doesn't need to embody something to frame this battle or this contest of the hierarchy because it has superseded him now, and this is a relief to Roshi because we see that this is ultimately what he wants to do.
Right, and the reassumption of this role solidifies a couple things for me anyways. um One, that the integration that he received from Jackie Chun has nourished him such that he does need to reassume this role as spiritual father, particularly as we know the events that are going to happen in the next couple of episodes is important for him to be reinstantiated as such before we go further. um Particularly as well the fact that the fight, I wouldn't say is above him. I would say it's this is gonna sound weird. It's gonna sound like a distinction without a difference, but it's more like beyond him.
It
It's
stepped
more
into a dimension that doesn't really apply to him, right?
a dimension of time, because it's a battle of the instantiated spirits of today, where Roshi represents the timeless spirit of the father. So there's no time for that, right? Uh, and Jackie Chun had a specific time as well. He was the like a grand master, right? Instantiated. But Roshi himself, Roshi outside of Jackie Chun persona, outside of the tournament, is more of a timeless figure. And so that idea that it's, I don't think it's beyond him as much as it is. It's a battle that exists in a generation beyond him is what I would say.
Yeah, beyond him is a good way of putting it, where it's sort of like there is a point where the immature or the young hero will surpass the old master in skill. Sort of like you think of like a Barristan
Well, let's say
and how
this.
he's so skilled, but he doesn't have physically have the strength. And over time, that
Time will get the better of him,
archetype
yeah.
catches up with him, right?
Well, let's say this, like Luke wasn't ever better than Yoda at his ability to commune with the Force, things like that, right? But what what Yoda provided for him was the ability for Luke to keep battling beyond Yoda's time. And that's kind of what we see here. Roshi is instantiated in both
Well,
Goku and
it's
Tien.
silly whenever we see Yoda fighting in the prequels,
I
right?
don't want to talk about, I was just talking about,
But you're right, because there's sort of a time where he needs to be stepped down and not be participating in this battle, right? And
yes.
it comes off silly, like comical whenever in the prequels he's acting, right? It's almost like it's kind of not the point.
Yeah, it totally misses the
He's
point
supposed to
of
be
him.
a
Well,
teacher type archetype.
that's the reason why Roshi has Jackie Chun to begin with, is because there needs to be a separation between those two spirits. And here we see that the spirit called forth is Roshi, because this battle needs to exist beyond Roshi. I think beyond is the good word for it.
It's a battle of youth,
Hmm.
and he portrays himself as a more youthful version of himself when
It,
he's Jackie Chan in a
let's say this,
sense.
it needs to exist outside of Roshi. This battle has to, the contestation of this hierarchy has to exist outside of Roshi, and so he distanced himself from it as much as he can. So let's go on from there.
Yeah.
So Turtle then criticizes Roshi and says he should act his age, which is really almost ironic in a way, because Roshi is acting his, more or less acting his age, because he has reassumed something, being the spiritual father, that is kind of an older spirit than Jackie Chun is to begin with. So he's already kind of instantiated that, and Turtle says he should act his age, um, right as Goku compliments him. So Goku says he's great. Old timer, you're so great.
This is a difference in Goku, I think. It's supposed to represent how far Goku has come because there is a reverence for the spirit of the father even in the recognition of his blindness. And I think that that's something that Roshi is testing people to integrate about him as the spiritual father. And so we see that Goku's
But
on
that's what I'm
a
saying. He is acting his age.
yeah.
That's why it's ironic what
Yeah,
Turtle says.
because all the ancestral father inevitably exhibits this blindness, right? It's something that has to be accepted as sort of an aspect of reality. And I think it's something that Goku has integrated in a different way from Tien, right? And so we're seeing Goku act it out here and say that even though Roshi is being criticized by Kame, you know, the voice of God through the turtle, through Kame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
Even
is
though
to
he
say,
knows what he's doing isn't the best, he can still be appreciated for what's good
right?
about him, and that's a
Which
good
isn't
thing
to
to do.
say, right, that Turtle is in the wrong for saying what he says,
Right,
because Turtle is doing what, or let's say this: the spiritual father, his blindness, though it should not be acknowledged by people like Goku, God still knows about it.
right.
The weaknesses and the blindnesses and the nakedness are always going to be visible to God. And so he says right there, you should act your age.
And it establishes the context of Goku in this situation to say, Roshi, you're so great, even though he's not acting as Jackie Chun, right? It's to show that there's like,
There's adoration still, despite the fact he doesn't take action in the world, as
well,
far as we know.
yeah, and this is at the same time that that scene is happening with um the intimidation of the devil, and then there's a beast intimidating a devil as well. And there's sort of like a there is nobility to be found even in not being oriented perfectly towards the light, even having blindness. There is something that supersedes that. And so Goku recognizes a mode of being in Roshi that speaks to him on that level.
And worthy. And so he compliments him. And so then Goku receives his freshly cleaned gi from the girls, and Krillin says that they're pretty nice or something like that. And
Hmm.
Bulma kind of freaks out. She's like, "Oh, I try my best," and she blushes, and Launch blushes, and uh, it's an interesting little part that the cleaning of one's clothes has brought meaning to both of their and yeah, to both of their existence, both their lives. In this purpose, they want Goku to look good for the last match. After all, is what they say.
Yeah, they have invested themselves in it such that calling out their attention to it is embarrassing to them, right? And so they both blush at the acknowledgement of how much care they've put into it.
Yeah, and but it's a sign that Bulma is happy doing modest things. Bulma can be happy doing modest things. She doesn't always have to be grandiose and wishing for the Dragon Balls and things like that. And this has come up with her story over and over. After all, the mundanity of Yamcha was where she found her boyfriend in the first season to begin with. It was something that was modest to begin with. She never in the beginning she did like Yamcha, and then the embarrassment kind of took them further along, and she lost that embarrassment way before Yamcha.
Well, there's also that interesting progression of Bulma's character where she's dissatisfied with Yamcha continuing to play games
Mm-hmm.
and to not instantiate himself in a dangerous way. And so we see, even going into the Red Ribbon Saga, Bulma is not happy with baseball player Yamcha, right?
Yeah,
And he's progressed a bit, but we do see, whether or not Toriyama meant to, he shows the response to the truly heroic acts, to the bravery in face of actual danger, because they pointed out there was a danger of Goku and Krillin mauling each other in a fight like this.
yeah,
And so, as Goku has won a fight of this level, the way that he won it and what the stakes were steps above that. And so we see that all of a sudden, there's a different type of reverence toward him.
yes, and I think that Launch and Bulma understand that that reverence is worth preserving, and the fact that Goku doesn't care about his image is something that they can then help with. And so, in a small way, they've become part of this journey that Goku's taking to climb this hierarchy, and it makes them happy to be part of it.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to how there's that sort of trope of girls liking bad boys and they want to cultivate his image, right? And there's sort of that idea where it's like, you're right, Goku doesn't really care about how he looks, and he's really honest in his expression, so much so that he's not really curating it. And so, in this appreciation for that pushing of the limit of being on the edge of how serious a fight should be, or how serious the experience needs to be, try to clean that up and try to make him able to confront it honestly, and try to clean up what he's doing to make it more noble or to make it more honorable, right?
Yeah. And so all of that comes together in that little scene with Bulma and Launch right here. I try my best. And then they ask where Oolong is, and Oolong, of course, is getting them a spot by being transformed. He's scaring everyone away by being a giant ogre.
Right.
And Puar comes up and teases him by being an even bigger monster. And then we see Yamcha come up. He's gotten out of the hospital. He's here to watch the fight. He wouldn't miss this big of a match. And so, really quick there, we see the normal dynamic between Oolong and Puar. Um, but it's interesting to me that Puar is kind of a herald for Yamcha in this instance. Like, she also was going to get a good seat. It's kind of implied, uh, as an ogre, or as a monster, and runs into Oolong doing the same thing. Um, Other than that, there's not too much more to say there besides the fact that Launch is transformed, so they can't use her to get to the front of the viewing
Yeah, it
gallery.
is funny because it's a story about Yamcha trying to get to a place where he can witness the fight. So Yamcha having participated in this fight to the point of serious injury that transcends the game, right?
Yeah,
We had just been talking about how Bulma's dissatisfaction with Yamcha was his sort of inability to transcend the game and to go into a more serious mode of being. And so then, sort of the projection, which is a very immature projection that comes from both Bulma and Yamcha, goes out here and is like, I'm a devil. Well, I'm a big cute thing that's even more dangerous than a devil. And then we see the fighter who has taken himself to his very limit.
yeah.
And so I think that's kind of tied into what that is. It's sort of his essence preceding him here.
That I like the way you put it. Yeah, his essence preceding him, like a herald, like I was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so they get to the front of the line, and then we get to see our contestants preparing for the fight. Tien is meditating as visions of Roshi haunt his spirit. Shen is impatient with Tien, ordering Chaozu to go get him for the final match. As Chaozu opens Tien's door, he sees him floating in the air, emanating a pulsing energy. They both leave for the fight after Chaozu interrupts the meditation, and back at the Go Crew's room, they all leave to witness the match. Upon arriving, Roshi and Shen see each other and throw insults back and forth. Meanwhile, Goku trains in a holy manner as both contestants are brought to the ring. Krillin comments that the battle has already begun. And so there's quite a bit to talk about here. First of all, Tien's meditation. So the dub is terrible in this instance, and it makes it really not serious. But in the sub, uh, Tien is really considering the words that Roshi said, allowing him to take the path of the light, that he'll never be a villain, and those words are kind of haunting him. And so when Chaozu goes to get him, he sees Tien is so deep in thought that he's like emanating these pulsing energy waves off of him. I'm curious what you think. What you have to think about that.
Well, let's start with what he's meditating about, right? So he had been confronted in his previous fight about specifically what are his limits? What is this fight going to consist of, right? It's he's saying, will you do the more difficult thing? Will you follow the more difficult path and not just not just try to kill this person, right? But to engage in an honest spirit. And so I think he's having a real conflict of what this fight means to him, going into it and to confront uh, Goku as a heroic spirit.
Especially being enlightened as he is and having the information that's now been disseminated from Roshi, it's kind of he has to turn a blind eye to it. He has to kind of blind himself to be able to continue doing what he's doing. And the fact that he has three eyes is no accident.
That's why
He's
Roshi says specifically, you can't be a villain. You already have that third eye.
You can't get rid of, yeah, he can't be a
Like you're
villain,
going to be
exactly.
haunted by these decisions that you're about to make. Those decisions being
Because he's hyper conscious.
right, that decision being that he would take this fight more seriously than it should be taken. He's being compelled to kill Goku as revenge for somebody, for something that happened outside of this.
And so, though that conflict is manifest externally as these ripples in space that are emanations, that pulsing energy, right? It's those disturbances that are being created the same way that, let's say, a thundercloud makes sound, right? They smash together and then make the shockwave. The same thing happening here. Tien's two forces within himself are conflicting such that it's emanating this pulsing wave.
It's a psychic disturbance,
Yes.
right? And so he's thinking so hard it physically is manifesting because he's so conflicted about what his purpose in this competition even is.
And so he doesn't have time to finish his meditation. And Chaozu and him leave to go to the fight. Now, when they all arrive to the fight, Roshi and Shen start throwing insults telepathically back and forth. Shen accuses Roshi of dressing up in a costume so that he could win the prize money. And I think this is just it's the perfect line for Shen because it's exactly the modus that he would take over the fact that Roshi did it to better his students, and that the fact that he can put his students ahead of his own personal goals is something Shen can't even fathom. Because in the next couple scenes, we're gonna see Shen make this match more personal and more personal as we get further along.
This is also the shame of Shin because Shin wants to participate in this fight without taking the responsibility of it.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, he did try to kill Goku earlier, but exactly that he's not in the fight himself.
Well,
He
his
didn't try.
criticism of Roshi being in the fight is to tell him, you just want to manipulate your position to win the money, and you couldn't do it.
Yeah. And it's a corrupt argument to begin with. It's
Because it's like,
disingenuous,
what is your investment in Tien?
and
Is it
that's
his success or yours?
what he's trying to do is tear down. And well, we know what it is for Shen,
Exactly.
but we'll see that in a second. Um, and so I think it's just a really interesting little thing between the two of them that gives us such good information about how their dynamic is supposed to exist and how they're against each other, what their thoughts or let's say how their spirits come in conflict with each other. We don't even have to see them fight to understand all of that.
Right. And it's also his way of saying, I'm being more honest than you. If
Hmm.
they defeat me in front of the whole world, without it having to be my identity, they do progress. And you're not willing to do that. You're not willing to pit yourself against what you've put out in the world. You're not willing to take responsibility of the training that you've given to
Hmm.
this person
Hmm.
and face it in front of the
Well,
world.
and think about what happened last time. He did did not do that with his brother, and that's what drove them apart. Is he didn't take that responsibility,
Right.
and we'll get into that very soon. But right, I think it's a pretty good part. And I just wanted to mention that. And then we see Goku training in that holy manner that we were talking about earlier. How he's just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, doing some stretches, things like that. And what Brock you were saying is that he's moving well.
Yeah,
He's
I think
following a
before we were
rhythmic.
recording, we talked about that where it's more of a cultural thing where we don't really do this, but there are more standardized practices that are your morning exercises that you would do in Japan. And it's kind of a more well-known process, and it's almost as if Goku's going through his regular routine, preparing himself for the day.
Just yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where it's like,
Not
to
like a
me,
big
this is just a
fight.
Thursday, right?
Yes.
And so Goku is going through his regular stretches,
Because he is just as open to the world today as he always is.
but to Tien, we see that he's so conflicted that he's creating these psychic ripples in the room around him
It's like
as he
making
thinks about it.
heat, yeah, and so as they both walk up, they're, like, emanating heat off each other, and the tension is so thick that Krillin states that the fight has already begun.
Yeah. And he is right because the fight begins with the approach to the fight. It begins with what their different interpretations of what the fight represents are, right?
Yeah, and their conceptualization of it. And so, as they stand there, the announcer calls forth the fighters and introduces them. Tien being a ruthless student of the Crane School, and Goku a powerful student of the Turtle School. Shen marks this as a chance to get revenge for his younger brother Tao, and we see a little flashback of Tien's fights, Goku's fights, and Tao's fight with Goku, where Tao eventually dies. And so here, I just this is just kind of a section I wanted to put to separate some of the other stuff. I don't think it belonged in either of the other sections. Um, but I will say here one thing, we do get to see more of what I was talking about with Shen, how he's really making this fight part of revenge for his younger brother. This is not about Tien improving. This is not about Tien proving he's the best. This is about revenge, and this is about Shen.
Right. And that was kind of what I was mentioning earlier, which is that Roshi, the inverse of this was him participating in the match for it not to be about him. Shin is not participating and making it
Paradoxically,
about
because
himself.
he's in the fight, but
Yeah.
it's not about him.
But he's
Shen is
calling
not in the
out
fight, but it's
exactly,
about
but he
him.
calls out Roshi and as if it were something for Roshi to be ashamed of. When in reality, it is what he's doing by trying to, as we'll see, intervene in this fight, right?
Yes, exactly. And we'll get to that next episode, I think. Something
Right.
like that. And I think that's really all I had for that one because the next thing we see is the match starting. So the match starts with Goku charging, but getting rebuked as Tien flies high in the air. Goku tries to land a kick, but gets pummeled with a Dodonpa instead. Crashing into the ring, Goku takes a little time to rebound, then charges Tien with his speed attack. Tien sees through this and strikes Goku, following up with vicious blows against the tournament wall, and we're left with that scene of Goku getting just destroyed against this wall with Tien's attacks that Roshi says is like a machine gun.
Yeah. He's there it is right there. He delivers a series of attacks like we've never seen.
Not in Dragon Ball. We've never seen it. We've never seen him land like that. At least we've seen fast attacks, but nothing like that.
Yeah.
And so I want to say to start here, we can see first of all, Goku's not playing around. He charges, and I think part of the reason is because he is eager to complete this match.
Because of his promise to Yamcha as
I was
well.
gonna say right because of his promise to Yamcha, and there's an additional motivation here, which is something that we were talking about earlier with the Goku versus Krillin wrap up we had last episode. Is that Krillin really wanted it, but Goku really wants this.
Yeah. Goku was not of the same sort of investment in his fight with Krillin. It was a fight of learning, but this fight sort of transcends the game because Goku is avenging a physical wound to one of his friends that was unnecessary and disrespectful, and he damaged Yamcha's ability to participate in the hierarchy, and so that's
Right.
something that needs to be answered, and that's above the normal sort of stakes of a fight like
It's
this.
almost damaging to the integrity of the hierarchy to insinuate that those willingly participating should be crippled by their participation in it.
Right. And
And Goku doesn't agree with that. Goku always thinks that people should be able to try and better themselves, and this is like the forceful removal of that ability.
we've seen different levels of seriousness from Goku, especially in his fight with Krillin, where there were moments where Krillin was intimidated by Goku's ability to take the fight seriously. This is Goku taking the fight seriously, right? This isn't necessarily just something that Goku's trying to learn from as well. Like this is Goku understands. He already knows that Tien's mode of being is unholy.
Right. And so he charges him to first map out his spirit and then be able to do what he does. And we're gonna see how that
Well, we see
transpires.
this is different from last time, right? Because Goku's motivation in winning the tournament last time was to prove that he was the best, to
Right.
to ultimately be the best. This is about stopping Tien from being at the top of the hierarchy, though, with Tien's mode of being as far as he's been able to understand it. And so
Right.
Goku
And
has
he
a
but he
slightly
needs
different
to understand it
motivation.
more. And so that's part of the reason of what's happening here. And right, you're right. Goku's motivation is up a notch. This whole tournament is up a notch from last time.
Right.
And so I do want to say the Dompa firing, right? Um, I think Goku gets hit by that almost on purpose. He wants to see how the orientation of Tien will allow himself to react to something obvious like Goku's kick that he tries to put at him, right? And that's kind of why I think Goku rebounds so easily, is because he gets through the initial steps of the, let's say, the process that Krillin was going through, but he gets through them in like a minute.
Well, it's the opposite of how Krillin fought Chao Tzu, where Chao Tzu kept trying to hit him with the Dodonpa, and Krillin dodged and dodged and dodged because he couldn't physically take it, right? But Goku establishes at the beginning of this fight, you can hit me with a Dodonpa if you want, but I killed Tao Pai Pai. I'm above this, right? I've already integrated that level of malice into my being. I killed the Red Ribbon Army when it was unnecessary. You're not going to kill me with a Dodonpa. Whereas Krillin had never done anything like that, and so he had to constantly be avoiding it.
Well, right, and it's also Goku saying like, "Will you use this? Is this the level that we're going to?"
Right, are you actually trying to kill me?
And so after that's shown, then he can take it to the next level, and the very next thing he does is his speed attack, his quick attack, let's say, which Tien can see through. We established this in the last episode that Tien was going to be able to follow it because he was able to see it, even though Krillin wasn't.
It's almost like Goku's testing to see if he's been able to integrate that this quickly. Because he kind
Right,
of talked
to
about
get
that.
to the unknown.
Yeah.
Goku's always trying to get to the unknown so he can have one foot in the
Well, not
unknown,
just
one
that,
foot in
he's
the
testing
orderly.
Tien's ability to get to the unknown as
But
well.
the
Because that
and
was what he had just
well, the
used in the
reason
previous
he
fight.
is right, the reason he is because for Goku, aside from the Yamcha motivation, is that Goku is participating in this chaotic clash to then formulate order out of it and raise the level of the human condition or the human spirit. And so to do that, they have to get to levels that they haven't been to before. And so he kind of has to exhaust these things first before they can get there.
Right. And, just wanting to make sure that we're looking at it from both sides because Tien is also a protagonist in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a bit of a shift here in the way that we see the story because while Goku plays sort of a Superman archetype role, Tien is really that interesting character. We see this happen multiple times from here on out, but he's similar to that Vegeta sort of story where we see someone who's grappling with what it would mean to integrate Goku's mode of being. And in a sense, he's more interesting than Goku. So Tien is attacking from a strong position here. And I think that Goku's testing him in the speed that he comes at him. It's very similar to when he starts that real assault against Krillin. And instead of being hit by it, uh, Tien immediately tries to deflect it, and he attacks and counterattacks against him. And Goku uses his tail to get around the counterattack.
Uh-huh.
And so there's sort of an interplay there where he says, "Okay, I just used this against Krillin. Let's see if you're on that level." Right? Because I don't think Goku looks at Tien like he's necessarily the strongest fighter as much as he's looking at him just to understand what are you doing here? What are you doing in this hierarchy, right?
To map out his spirit,
And
yeah.
so there's a real sense of interplay here as Goku's interfacing with him, where he's fighting with him and he's kind of learning what exactly Tien is going to do.
And so, Tien's able to see through it. He's traveled the road. He has used that great teacher of experience. He is broken out of the, let's say, protective barrier of his master, all of that stuff, which allows him to do and see Goku's quick attack here. And he strikes him and then follows up with those attacks. And actually, he gives him a double sledge at the end and then picks him up and says, "It's over." And that's actually when we cut to the end of the episode. But
Right, as well as his vicious strikes against the edge of the arena, which is
yeah,
sort of like, it feels like Tien playing with the limits of what this tournament is by putting Goku against the wall of the arena and beating on him. It's sort of one of those things where he's put him up against the edge, right? And we see this kind of in different ways where someone will be forced up to the edge of the arena and have to do something
well,
similar to the way that Jackie Chun
it's
headbutted
also
him to get out of that
and
position.
it's also vicious because Tien is somewhat insulted by the idea that Goku used this against him.
Right.
Because, like you said, Goku not seeing him as necessarily the strongest fighter is actually kind of pissing Tien off. So he really wanted to nail it home, and so what he does in the edge there is just like beats him, and beats him so that he can get that message across. And this being too, Goku is very open to this. Uh, Even though it looks like Goku's really beat up, we're gonna see how it transpires next episode.
Well, also Goku is treating Tien the same way that he treated Tao Pai Pai, which
Yes,
is that initially he is going to let him go all out on him, and he's going to integrate what
this is the Korin
strength
method. Yeah,
Tien has. He says, "Okay, let me see if you're better than Tao Pai Pai. Give me all
and
you've got. I'll integrate it, and we'll see next episode what that means. And are you willing to adjust to what I do with that knowledge?" Right?
exactly. And so, like you said, we'll have to see you next episode because this one kind of ends like right as action is happening. So will Goku lose? Find out next time.
On Dragon Ball.
So if you guys like what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe. We do upload episodes Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays on Rumble. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with us. I'm your host on the Left Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys enjoyed the episode and you have a good night.